Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Jimenez, your host for Islam in Contemporary Life. Conversations with Professor Dr. Fathi Osman. Muslims believe that if they open their eyes to others, they see God and thus perfect a relationship that God wants with all humanity. Why? Well, we're all children of Adam. Cultures and ethnicity may vary around the world, but we're all related and bonded in what Islamic scholars believe is a pluralistic world. But does pluralism work? Do we need more than the internet and a world money market to bring us all together? Islam says yes, a universal effort to reach a common understanding with one another without losing our respect for individuality. For the next hour, we're going to be talking about pluralism with Professor Dr. Fathi Osman. He is a doctor of philosophy, a professor, a lecturer, one of the world's foremost scholars on Islam. He is also the author of a book called The Children of Adam, an Islamic perspective on pluralism. Professor, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Pluralism was usually referred to in religious terms, but does pluralism now have a wider meaning?
Well, yes, because there is a big difference between tolerance, which is an ethical teaching of all religions, and pluralism. Pluralism implies full equality, that there is no difference between any human being and the other. And there is a dynamic implication, because pluralism implies also that these people live together and work together and cooperate with one another. So this is more than just accepting the other and tolerating his existence or her existence.
What is pluralism's meaning in religious terms?
In the religious terms, this is the same meaning as the most recent meaning, because in religion, all the people are the children of Adam and his wife Eve, and all have to cooperate together, and all are equal. There is no difference. The only thing is that for a long time there was an emphasis on tolerance or coexistence rather than cooperation. Cooperation was left to the individual initiative, but there was no organizational side of it in the whole world. Now, according to the United Nations and the Declaration of Human Rights and so on, we are expecting a sort of cooperation among the people. Then we have pluralism within the country itself, and then the people have to cooperate within their country as citizens.
How does pluralism achieved in an individual society, and is it any different in achieving pluralism on a global?
Well, I think if people succeed in developing pluralism in a national society, they can succeed in the universal society with some effort, because here we have the ethnic pluralism, because sometimes the people within the society, within a certain country, may have different religions, have different ethnicities, but when they go outside the country, they may find more diversity, other ethnic groups, other religions. So it might be easier within the national society to have pluralism, but it is a step in, an essential step for reaching the global pluralism. Otherwise, we cannot reach it if it is missing within the national level.
But what is it within our society here in the United States that helps us achieve pluralism?
I believe that the United States has a unique situation because it had before the Native Americans, and then it had Anglo-Saxons coming from Europe or others from Europe, Western Europe and Eastern Europe. And in all these mixing, added to the coming of the Asians, the Africans, especially the African Americans and their role in developing the country, all this together make the United States as it is described by those who like the situation, a melting pot, or those who are critical, a salad bowl. Anyhow, there is a sort of mixture in the United States which bring all the globalism. There is a mini globalism in the United States. So there is a real chance to start from here and to override all the sensitivities, all the problems between different ethnicities or different faiths or different denominations. Also in the United States, there are many denominations in Christianity. So all this together, I think, gives the United States a chance to provide to the world a sort of mini global pluralism.
Is that because it's gone beyond its mistakes of wiping out indigenous people like Native Americans and the way it treated African Americans in a society of slavery for years? Is it beyond that? Has it gotten past that?
It is trying to go beyond, and I think constitutionally speaking, philosophically speaking, yes, since the pioneers of the early founders of the United States, they cared about this. But the practice, of course, needed some time to go in the daily life and in the human relations according to what is mentioned in the philosophies or in the Constitution. So until now, we find some signs about racism, about this sort of ethnic hostilities and so on. But the people are working hard, the leaders and the people, the writers, the authors, the philosophers, everybody is doing, even the religious leaders, everybody is doing his best or her best to go or to match with the level which was expected 200 years ago by the forefathers.
Does pluralism take more than tolerance to work, though?
Yes, of course, because tolerance is just accepting the other, while pluralism is working with the other and considering him from the depth as equal and working together in the society. So I believe that pluralism goes beyond tolerance, not accepting the other with sensitivity, with reluctance, with not liking or something like this. No, you have to feel that the other is completely equal, and you have to feel that you need to work with him, and as well as he or she needs to work with you, and that the society flourishes only when you work together.
Professor, how do the revelations of God to Muhammad show people toward pluralism?
It shows people towards pluralism the same way as all religions, by guiding them to the Creator. Because when the people focus on the Creator, they find that all creation in its diversity is still equal in being a creation. While if they focus on themselves, they will have the egocentrism, and every group may think that it is better than the other. So I think the direction is very important. When you have the direction towards the Creator, you will be enriched by the diversity of creation and the differences in creation, and I am talking all creation, including the human creation. While if you concentrate on the creation, and specifically the human creation, then every group can find privileges or advantages or something in its own group, while it looks to the other as something alien and something strange and something inferior. So looking to the other is very important, and this full equality with the other comes when you look to the Creator.
If we can find a consensus or uniformity in our religious beliefs, is it possible to find the same uniformity or consensus in detailed matters and more refined matters of society?
I don't think so. I think even within one faith or one denomination, and also one ethnicity with regard to the ethnic aspirations and so on, you will find differences in interpreting these aspirations or these principles of unity in any faith, because the human mind is individual, and the free will individualizes the human being more. According to the free thinking and to the free will, you will have always a variety of interpretations. So, in spite of these interpretations and differences in the details, if people can agree on the common grounds, then they can work together and they can feel the equality, and they will feel in this diversity richness, not contradictions and limitations.
So, in other words, we respect the common ground that we all share, but we respect each other's individualities.
Of course, because I don't want pluralism should not be an excuse for abrogating or canceling or ignoring or abolishing the other and his or her identity, cultural identity, ideological identity, political identity, religious identity. It is not an excuse for that. To be pluralistic, that means that we have a collectivity of no people or no one. No, we want everyone to be himself or herself, and then we have a wise and a positive and constructive collectivity of people who know their identity very well, and they know also and respect the identity of others.
That hasn't been easy historically. There have been governments and peoples and groups who've wanted to dominate others ideologically and politically.
That's true, and also the power, the human being, the human selfishness and the ego. When, according to the Bible and according to the Quran, when we had two children of Adam, they fought one another and one killed the other. And for a crazy excuse, that is, one was accepted, his sacrifice was accepted by God, and the other, his sacrifice was not accepted. So for such a thing to be closer to God or to be accepted by God, one killed the other. So we had always this egoism or egotism and selfishness and abuse of power. We had history of empires all over history in which the big or the superpower tried to suppress the others and ignore the rights of the subjects. Even the word subject within the national level or the imperial level, that means that the citizen is a subject to the ruler. So it was not easy, and it took us a long time and a long journey and a lot of efforts to reach the simple principle which is expressed in all religions. But to reach this fact ethically, spiritually, legally, practically, it took us all this journey with a lot of bloodshed, with a lot of conflicts, until we realized that we cannot live in this world. The world cannot be monopolized by one ethnicity, by one religion, by one power, by one emperor, and we have to work together if we want really for all of us to flourish in this world.
Are there any particular events in history that say we're waking up to the idea that we can't live apart, we can't be pointing missiles at one another, we have to open our borders and our minds and our cultures to one another?
I believe that in the old world, especially speaking about the Muslims, because here not because of any bias, but because the Muslims did not know the feudal system. Something unique happened in the medieval times, that with regard to Muslims that they had no feudal system. So they went from a place to place, from a country to country, lived with different ethnicities according just to the economic motivation to earning their living, either in commerce, in business, in agriculture, in anything, importing, exporting, navigation. So it was easy to go from one place to another, and it was easy to describe a person, especially the outstanding figures, because in all the history they care about the prominent figures, that a person was born in a place and lived in a place and died in a third place and was buried there. And many of the graves are misleading, because you find people buried in certain places in which they never lived, but it happened that they were buried there. They were there in the time of death. So this dynamism in movement was very easy when we had no empires and no nationalism. There was no special nation, and there was no empire. And even if we have empires, it was easy to go to China, in spite of the fact that it is a separate empire. And the emperor, in most cases, would accept foreigners as traders or something, of course, not as colonists. So there was an easier movement, and there was no ideological or practical political barriers between the people. So it was easy. But after imperialism and after nationalism, both something bad and something good. Nationalism is not bad in itself, to care about certain group of people with whom you have bonds, ethnic bonds, linguistic bonds, cultural bonds, historical bonds. This is normal, and we are not against it. I am with the great historian, British historian Toynbee, that it was abused. Instead of making relations within the smaller group, it tried to make barriers, whether psychological or political, with the other groups. This was the disadvantage of nationalism, that everybody concentrates on himself or herself, without this sort of universal look or universal perspective, which we had when we were Christians or Jews or Muslims or whatever, servants of God, and God is the Lord of all. This, of course, was restricted when we had this national side, and here nationalism might be connected with chauvinism, with a sort of superiority complex, looking to the others from above, not really Nazism, but a sort of Nazism in lower degrees in certain nationalism.
Let's move to the Quran and how it addresses pluralism. The Quran's view of racial and ethnic differences.
It admits it as a fact, but not as a barrier, and as a sign of the diversity of God, of God's creation. That God's creation has a lot of variety, and in the human beings, the Homo sapiens, in spite of the common sense and so on, there are physical, linguistic, cultural differences, sociological differences between these nations or these groups, human groups all over the world. But this is not a barrier. It should enrich the people, and the people are taught by the Quran to recognize these differences, and recognize is not as we know it in lessons of geography, that other ethnicities exist or other languages exist, but really to recognize how to work with them and what are their merits and their limitations and what are our merits and our limitations. This is the recognition which is required, and which happened when the people moved at the individual level not after now having political relations and nationalities and passports and all these things. And that is what the United Nations is trying now to reach this level of making the universal citizen, that everybody is citizen in every country.
How important is human rights in the Quran?
It is very important because according to the Quran, it is from God, not from the human being. It is not a grant from a king or an emperor. It is not a philosophy. It is a faith that God has created the children of Adam equal and has conferred on them dignity. And the dignity is a word which is comprehensive. It implies fulfilling the responsibilities and demanding the rights, not only having the rights without responsibility. Dignity, because a person who does not fulfill the responsibility has no dignity. He is or she is an opportunist, takes the rights and ignores the responsibilities. So dignity is a very, very accurate word. And this dignity is represented according to the Quran not only in the moral way or in the religious way. It should have representations or implementations in the economic field, because if a person does not find his or her needs, he cannot or she cannot feel dignity. So it is represented in, according to the same verse, this dignity in earning the economic needs for the human life and in moving all over the world easily without any restrictions. According to the Quran, the human being is given life to live in the world as a whole. So these are the manifestations or the representations or the implementations of the dignity, material and geographical, moving all over the world.
What does the Quran say specifically in regards to equality about men and women?
According to the Quran, they are very equal from the early beginning. We haven't in the Quran something that Eve was created from the rib of Adam. Both are created from the same source, and it is nafsun wahida in Arabic, that means the same spirit or the same spiritual source. So they are both equal from the beginning, and during all life they are equal. They are equal in the family, in fulfilling or in running the family affairs. Family affairs should be run based on mutual consultation and mutual consent, not consent only, which gives confidence without consultation, and not consultation which does not lead to consent. But they are both required in running the family. And in the society or in the country as a whole, males and females both are responsible in speaking up, in criticizing anything wrong, in advising for anything right, which is called in the terminology of the Quran, enjoining the doing of what is right and forbidding the doing of what is wrong. And this is a responsibility for the man and the woman, for the adult and even for the young person. He is supposed to be educated to do that since he is a child.
How should Muslims, particularly devout Muslims, deal with people of other religions?
Well, the practice is not always the ideal thing. Muslims are not infallible, and they make mistakes. And of course, they were influenced by bad experiences, bitter experiences during wars, the Crusades, the colonial experience. All the relations in history between different religions was not always good. When the relations were good, like in Spain, for example, in Middle Ages, we had these wonderful relations between the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews. And we had this sort of intellectual exchange between Averroes, who was a Muslim, Ibn Rushd, Maimonides, who was a Jew, and Thomas Aquinas, who was a Catholic. So in good times, there was a sort, whether there was an agreement on all the opinions or difference, but the exchange happened. And there were cordial relations between all these components of the societies. But in modern times, after having this patriarchal attitude that it is a society of men, and of course this was strengthened by having this military attitude that if the power has to be the source in settling the differences, then men were more powerful physically. Automation and the mechanization was not there to give the woman another power rather than the physical or the body power. So in that time, the patriarchal system and the political system, tyranny, even within the Muslim countries, they were not always run by just monarchs. They were run sometimes by despots, colonial system, and oppressing always the peoples. In all this atmosphere, there was an attitude towards oppression. And I don't claim that always the relations with the other, whether the other was a different ethnicity or a different gender or a different faith, was the ideal which is expected from those who believe that all people are the children of Adam, according to the circumstances. But we should not mix always the sources with the historical circumstances. So the historical circumstances come up and down, may comply with the teachings of the religion or may deviate, but the sources are still guiding, and we should insist that these sources guide, and we should not get fed up with these sources just because they were abused. Everything could be abused. The civil rights could be abused. The Constitution could be abused. The Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations may be abused, but we should stick to it to achieve the ideals and the principles which are there.
In that case, would you encourage other Muslims to visit synagogues, go down and spend time at the cathedral, attend a mass?
Yes, of course. This is required, and this is what happened.
It's required.
Yeah, it is required, and that is what happened, and it is taking place now. For a certain time, probably there was cautiousness, there was sometimes lack of confidence, but these were the exceptions, but not the general rule. As a matter of fact, the general rules were Muslims go to non-Muslims in their feasts, congratulate them, participate in any festival made by others. And the Prophet himself received the Christians who came to him from Najran, from the south, to inquire about his message and so on. He received them in his mosque, allowed them to pray in his mosque, directed them to the direction to which they like to pray. Everything happened in a very easy way, in a very smooth way.